We have just an amazing registration. People are coming in now. I know some of you were early. We get on early too. And so we've been waiting. We're just gonna give everyone an extra minute, and then I will do my official welcome. I do have to tell you that you have a lot to learn today. I've learned so much, and I can't wait to see this beautiful presentation again and learn more. So I am going to press the start recording button to my somewhat official welcome to everyone, and we will get started. Hello, and thanks everyone for joining us at the Center for Financial Social Work today. We do have a wonderful presentation and training for you, and we do value your time. So we're going to jump right in. We want to involve you today. So we have a bunch of polls for you to learn from and for us to learn from. My name is Rita Wolfson, and I am the founder of Financial Social Work, and I'm really happy to welcome you today. We're going to start off with a poll as soon as I pull it up. So, launch this poll for you. Okay, so Felix has some great polls in his presentation today, but it occurred to me, and you can choose more than one on this poll, that I'd like to find out a little bit more about who's in our audience. And 64.5% of you have voted. Let's see if we can get a few more of you. And I always tell our trainers for these webinars what a great audience we have, that you have great questions and you always participate, and you are not disappointing me here. Over 80% of you have voted, so let me go ahead. Wow, this is interesting. Okay, let me share this with you. Wow, so I knew it. Most of you are here because of the topic, and I don't blame you, and you don't even know yet how great a training it's going to be. Okay, well, that's good. 21% of you have, okay, that's really good. I'm happy with that. A good number of you have joined us before. So let me close that poll and get started. I'm going to quickly tell you about Felix, and his topic is financial discrimination and disparities in the LGBTQIA plus community. And I'm going to let him tell you more about himself when he takes over in a little bit. I do want you to know that there are messages for everyone in the chat box, that the slides aren't shared, they are proprietary, but the recording will be on our website, Facebook page, and YouTube channel, probably later today or by tomorrow, and you will receive the recording via email. You can type your questions in the question box as we go along, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation and answer as many as we can. Felix has agreed to stay with us for an extra 10 minutes, so we'll have a chance to get some more questions answered. I'd like to begin talking about money, which is always the topic of our monthly free webinar in some way, shape, or form. I know the stress and anxiety that are associated with anything financial. So I suggest that we all take a deep breath in and then let it out. Center ourselves for all we're going to learn together. And one more deep breath, and we'll move on. I do like to share what I call our financial social work affirmation. Just for today, I will love myself enough to face my fears, practice self-acceptance, and embrace hope. Just for today, I will silence my inner critic, speak my truth, and make peace with my past. I will give myself permission to eliminate toxic people, beliefs, and behaviors from my life. And just for today, I will prepare for a better tomorrow by making friends with my money and with myself today. I put a lot of time and thought and effort into creating that affirmation, and I do believe it captures what my work is all about. So we'd like to know how you learned about today's webinar. That would be helpful for us to know. So if you learned about it some other way, you can share that in chat, and Olga can tell us about it. Okay. Okay. We have some people going to share some things in chat. Okay. 70% of you have voted. I'll give you a few more seconds. This is always fun for me when I remember to check this out, because it tells us how we can better reach all of you. All right, over 80%. This is one of our all-time best audiences, I think. So I'm going to close this and share it. All right, so 50% of you are part of our financial social work community already, and over a quarter of you have friends that were kind enough to share it with you. Facebook, and seems like all that time I spent tweeting about it really wasn't that productive, but that's okay. So Olga, anybody put something in chat?
Yes, we have some answers that someone knows about. It's from Felix, someone from coworkers, and someone just searching in Google. So
okay, good. That's helpful to us, Olga. So I'm done with my polls. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about financial social work, and you'll know why we do these monthly free webinars. My work is the intersection of politics, the economy, social work, economic, and social justice. When you think of the times we're living in, you can appreciate how they come together and why we think it's so important. And I had thought about a poll. We've been doing some pieces over the past year on COVID and how our audience was coping with it and thinking about it. And I thought about doing something with that today, but Felix's presentation is too great not to just get through this and get him started on it. But you can see these are the things that we care about. So we know that no one chooses to have money problems. We also know that most people do, unfortunately. So my financial wellness model is based upon the fact that it's our relationship with money and with ourselves that drives our financial behavior. And financial behavior is how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. And it is that behavior that determines our financial circumstances. And it's a bit simplistic, but it is the truth, because until and unless behavior changes, nothing changes. And so it is where behavioral change happens. And my work goes beyond dollars, cents, debt, math, budgets, and crisis intervention. We need to go beyond those to help clients be more positive and more proactive financially. We explore the fundamentals of financial well-being, the thoughts, feelings, attitudes, beliefs, experiences, and values. We each have all of those, and they are driving how we behave financially, how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. They are a critical component of our financial lives and our personal lives. The motto is interactive, reflective, and strengths-based. It's educational, motivational, and supportive, very holistic, multidisciplinary, and healing, hopeful, helpful, and it works with individuals and in groups. We help people change their relationship with money by recognizing, embracing, and taking ownership of personal financial health, change their relationship with self through self-discovery, self-care, and self-healing. And we've talked about the true social work component, that psychosocial piece, changing the thinking and then changing the behavior. So the goal of financial social work is for all of us to make peace with our money. And I cannot tell you how excited I am to introduce you to Felix and to have him do his beautiful and wonderful presentation for you. Felix, I am turning it over to you now.
Okay, thanks so much, Rita. Can everyone hear me okay?
You're great.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So welcome to today's webinar. My name is Felix Pittman. I use he, him, his pronouns, and today we're going to be talking about financial discrimination and disparities in the LGBTQIA+ community. You'll often hear me use this full acronym, although there are acronyms, versions of this acronym that are longer than this, but I might use an abridged version of LGBTQ+, or just simply queer and trans. And then I want to start today by having a land acknowledgement. So I want to recognize that from my home, I am leading this webinar on the unceded land of the Occaneechi and Eno peoples. And I ask that you join me in acknowledging the Occaneechi and Eno communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. And I also acknowledge that where I'm leading this webinar today, Durham, North Carolina, was founded upon exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples, including those on whose land Durham is located. And this acknowledging of land, this is just one way how we can all commit to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. And there's a really handy website here. I would recommend maybe getting some pen and paper to write a few things down today, or you can always use the phone on your camera to take a quick snapshot of different parts of these slides. So this website here will help you find out whose land you're occupying. What we're going to cover today is a little bit about me first, and then an introduction to relevant terminology that'll be brought up during the webinar, then a note about BIPOC, that is Black, Indigenous, People of Color, Trans communities, then moving on to general financial disparities, on to workplace and hiring discrimination, then housing discrimination, then the cost of discrimination in medical care, and then, oh, I'm so sorry, I meant to change this. Instead of action steps for social workers, this is action steps for allies, and you'll see that reflect on those slides. Then moving on to a brighter future for the LGBTQ+ individuals and communities. Then finally, some additional resources and organizations you can check out, and hopefully we'll have plenty of time for questions. And I'll do my best to to slow things down as much as I can, we are going to be covering a lot today. So I'll try to be balancing those two. A little bit about
Felix, could you please tell people about the handout?
Oh yes. Oh, so sorry. So there are two handouts. They're the same material in each. One is a PDF format, and the other is just a Word doc. So you know, if you are deaf, hard of hearing, or have low vision, you can access these documents. Or if you're just someone who likes to read along, you're welcome to access these documents. These can be found in the Handouts tab. And then yeah, so that's the handouts. So thanks for the reminder, Rita. So a little bit about me. As I mentioned, I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a graduate of the UNC Chapel Hill School of Social Work. I graduated in 2014 with my MSW. I currently live in Durham, North Carolina with my partner and our cats, and I serve as a program coordinator and mental health educator at the local Durham nonprofit Seeds. It's a really wonderful organization. You all should check it out. I'm also the co-chair of Chords Camp. So this is Queer-Oriented Radical Days of Summer. This is a summer band camp for queer kids. And then, so the way I describe my gender to people is non-binary transmasculine, although trans man is acceptable, as well as just, you know, I'm a man. I am queer. I'm also disabled and neurodivergent. That's another word, if you're not familiar with, I would recommend taking a look at that, maybe doing a quick Google search. I also teach queer and trans-centered yoga classes and individual lessons, all virtual these days. And then I wanted to take a moment to share a little bit about my journey to financial social work. So in my MSW program at UNC Chapel Hill, I took a class on social entrepreneurship and financial capacity building. And in that class, I was first introduced to the idea that money doesn't have to only be a source of stress, that there are actually tools and resources available to build that financial capacity. And I recognize that privilege does play a large role in accessing a lot of these resources and even knowing about them in the first place. I was introduced to the Center for Financial Social Work last fall. I love the webinars and the resources. And so I reached out to Rita, and we came up with a plan for me to deliver this presentation today. And my interests, my own personal interest in financial social work is applying a pro-intersectional lens to overall financial social work. And if you haven't heard of intersectionality, that's maybe another word to jot down. I won't be able to go into it too much today, but that's a little bit about me. And of course, if you have questions, you can about this slide or any others, you're welcome to post those in the chat. I want to offer a trigger warning because some of the topics we'll be discussing today may be emotionally distressing for some people. There's a chance we won't mention all of these, but there will be brief mentions of harassment, sexual assault, anti-LGBTQ+ violence, death, poverty, houselessness, and mental health topics like depression. And while you know the content of today's webinar is really important to learn about, what's just as important, probably more important, is taking care of yourself and taking breaks as you need to. So if a topic feels too heavy, you know, walk away from the laptop for a little while. That is perfectly okay. So we'll start off with a poll. And this question is, how would you describe your knowledge of financial discrimination and disparities that exist for the LGBTQIA+ community? And then I will go ahead and open this poll. Just a moment, bear with me. And it is launched now. And great participation. We're already at almost 70%. Okay, so we're getting close to 80%, so I'll go ahead and close this poll now. And I'll share the results. So it looks like a good bit of folks have little knowledge around this topic, and I mean that's fine. That's more than fine. That's why we're sharing this webinar today, so we can all learn something. And thanks so much for participating in the poll. Okay, so we'll keep moving along. Bear with me, my computer is being slow. Okay, so an introduction to some relevant terminology. I'll go through this pretty quickly. So this is another great chance to maybe take a picture of the left side of the screen and the right side if you want to refer back to this later. So first we'll go through some of the acronym. Lesbian, this is just referring to someone who is romantically or sexually attracted mostly or exclusively to women. Gay is attraction to someone of the same gender or a similar gender. Bisexual is attraction to multiple genders, and the understanding of and definition of this term has changed over time, especially over the last several years. Then transgender, this is always used as an adjective, never as a noun. This often refers to simply, just as trans, and this refers to someone whose gender is different than the gender they were assigned at birth, and it's an umbrella term that also includes many non-binary people. So just for example, I was assigned female at birth, yet I'm a man, and so that means I'm transgender. And that's my understanding of my own gender. And then cisgender, similarly, or likewise, another adjective, this applies to people whose gender matches the gender they were assigned at birth. So if you were assigned female at birth and you are a woman, that means you're cisgender. So queer, this was formerly a slur, but this term has been reclaimed by many members of the community and means that someone is romantically and or sexually attracted to multiple genders. And this term, it's expansive in its meaning and is often representative of more complex identities. So being queer means something just a little bit different to almost everyone, which I think is really wonderful. There's room for variation. Then BIPOC, as I mentioned before, this is an acronym meaning Black, Indigenous, and people or person of color. Intersex, this is an umbrella term used to describe individuals whose anatomy and body fall outside the female-male gender binary. And many intersex folks are born with ambiguous genitalia and often have really huge life-changing medical decisions made for them without their knowledge or consent. Then non-binary, again, for many people, this also falls under transgender. This refers to individuals whose gender falls outside of the female-male gender binary. And some non-binary folks feel or are both masculine and feminine, and then others just aren't on that spectrum at all. Asexual, this refers to people who either don't experience sexual attraction to others or experience very little attraction. Likewise, demisexual is reference to people who may experience sexual attraction to others under certain circumstances. Then gender affirming healthcare, we're gonna hopefully talk about this some towards the end of the presentation, but this refers to physical and mental health care interventions that support LGBTQ+ folks. This can include hormone therapy, gender affirming surgeries, and other interventions. Two-spirit, this is an adjective. This is a term some indigenous peoples use to describe their gender as embodying both masculine and feminine spirits. This is another one to maybe take a note on and do some research later. A lot of indigenous folks don't adopt this term for themselves personally, and there's some history to that. So I would encourage you to look into that history. Then heterosexual, also known as straight. This is the quality of being attracted to the binary, quote unquote, opposite gender. A few more terms before we really dive into the presentation is sexuality and sexual orientation. I've noticed there's often confusion around the difference between sexual orientation and gender. So we're gonna go into that, and then also sex versus gender. So sexual orientation, this refers to the attraction a person feels to other people. So these are things like heterosexual, queer, gay, bisexual, and more. Then gender or gender identity, although I don't typically use the word identity following up gender because someone's gender is just their gender. Then this is different than and separate from sexual orientation. Gender refers to someone's inherent or realized identity as cisgender, transgender, non-binary, etc. Then sex versus gender, a person's sex can be just as diverse and expansive as their gender. And most of the time, sex typically refers to someone's biological specification as male, female, or intersex, while gender refers to a person's innermost understanding of themselves and may or may not correspond with their assigned at birth sex or gender. Then microaggression. This is a brief, subtle expression of hostility and or discrimination. Gender assigned at birth, as I mentioned, is this is the gender a person is assigned at birth. It's most commonly referred to as assigned female at birth, or AFAB, and then assigned male at birth, or AMAB, and you'll hear me use this acronym. I also want to make a note about pronouns briefly. So these are words like she, her, he, him, or they, them, and not that we needed the validation, but it was helpful when all major writing manuals officially recognized they, them as a valid singular pronoun. So an example of how to use this, Taylor is going to paint their bedroom this weekend, they're painting it blue. So that's how to use that pronoun. And then there are also other pronouns we refer to as neo-pronouns, and I would encourage you to look some of those up as well to educate yourselves. Okay, so this poll is completely optional and only if you feel comfortable sharing. Are you a member of the LGBTQIA+ community? I'll go ahead and launch that poll. Okay, and I'll go ahead and close the poll in just a few seconds. Okay, and I'll close this. So it looks like around 30% yes, 58% no, and 5% not sure. So I hope that I do right by my community today, and I hope that I do right by our allies. So okay, I'm gonna keep moving on. Next, I want to make an important note. So the vast majority of the LGBTQ+ community has experienced discrimination at some point. So, but Black trans women and other trans women of color face the most dangerous forms of oppression and discrimination. And according to a study, trans women of color have a life expectancy of 30 to 35 years of age. And this is caused by very direct and also systemic violence, anti-trans violence against trans women of color. And to learn more about how to help end this violence, you can visit the website that I have at the bottom of this slide, and I'll also revisit that when I'm sharing resources later on. We'll keep moving on for now. I also want to acknowledge my own privilege as a white person, as a male presenting person, and as a man. In terms of trans folks, I have a lot of privilege, and I want to acknowledge that. Okay, so we're going to move into to the main parts of our presentation today. So I'll share some general financial disparities in this community. So we'll start by talking a little bit about older LGBTQ+ couples. So older cisgender lesbian couples experience higher rates of poverty, around 9.1%, compared to older cisgender heterosexual couples, which they come in at about 4.6%. Then the average cisgender lesbian makes 12% less annually than the average cisgender heterosexual woman. That's an annual income. And this wage gap is even greater for cisgender gay men versus cisgender heterosexual men. And I'll note here that there are discrepancies in research findings around these cisgender populations. Regardless of that, cisgender gay and bisexual men earn 10% to 32% less than similarly qualified cisgender heterosexual men. I'll make a note here about BIPOC LGBTQ+ individuals. They have statistically significant higher poverty rates than their same race cisgender straight counterparts. So they experience much more significant poverty, then I'll share this. 29% of LGBTQ plus Americans reported that discrimination moderately or significantly affected their financial well-being. This also includes 37% of Black individuals and 54% of transgender individuals. Then time for another poll. So I will pull this up. So here we have, what percentage of LGBTQIA plus individuals earn less than $12,000 annually? Okay, I'll keep the poll open for a few more moments. All right, looks like we've got close to 80%. I'll go ahead and close this poll and share. So the correct answer is 22%. So 22% of LGBTQ plus individuals earn less than $12,000 annually, and then I'll add to this that 15% of transgender people report making less than $10,000 per year, and that's a rate of poverty that is nearly 4 times that of the general population, nearly 4 times, which is staggering and shocking. Oh, I'll also make a note that I encourage you to check out some of the artwork that's shared during this presentation. I sourced from a lot of BIPOC, queer and trans folks, and of course have given them credit in the captions for the images. So so take a look and enjoy the images shared in this. So briefly, I'll mention a little bit about student loan debt and some of the unique challenges for this community. So 71% of LGBTQ plus millennials with a bachelor's degree have student loan debt, and almost 1/5 owe more than $100,000. So LGBTQ plus millennials, they have more student debt, lower average income, and overall feel less financially secure than their generational peers. So when trying to deal with and manage student loan debt, a lot of young LGBTQ plus adults don't have familial support to rely on. And along with that, only 39% of young LGBTQ plus adults say that they feel completely accepted by their families, and 33% report being kicked out of their homes at some point due to their sexual orientation or gender identity. Then 60% of LGBTQ plus workers have less than 3 months worth of emergency savings. And only 35% of queer individuals report being able to rely on family or friends for financial support before coming out. And then only 20% could say the same after coming out. So that's a 15% difference there. And a lot of young, LGBTQ plus folks of any age experience discrimination, judgment, and abuse from their families of origin. And this affects their ability to, quote unquote, succeed in creating financial stability and security in the way that we know it. So I posted a question here: what is causing these disparities, and is it just inherently more expensive to be a member of the LGBTQ plus community? The answer is a little complex, and maybe more complex than we can fully answer today. But something important to be aware of is that it doesn't cost more to be a part of this community just because of being queer or trans. It costs more because of the discriminatory laws, policies, practices, and behaviors that exist. So those are some of the general financial disparities. And we'll move on to yet another poll. So this one is around the annual earnings of transgender women, and by what percentage does this decrease following their physical and or social gender transitions? Okay, I'll keep the poll open for a few more seconds. All right, close this up and share the results. So the correct answer is 33%. It looks like most people, well, it was pretty close between to choice C and choice D. So it is the annual earnings of transgender women decreases by 33% following their transitions. And interestingly enough, the earnings of transgender men actually slightly increases following their transitions. And this is the results of a few studies. This definitely does not apply to every situation, to every person. There are for sure exceptions to this. But I think this speaks a lot about just in general how the gender disparities and gender wage gap in general. So so thanks for doing that poll, you all. Then we'll move on to more workplace and hiring discrimination. So 35% of LGBTQ plus Americans said that their ability to be hired has been negatively affected to a significant degree in the past year due to discrimination. And along with that, about 31% of people have faced negative impacts on their salary or their ability to be promoted or even their ability to retain employment. So it not only affects hiring, but it also affects, upward mobility in people's careers and their ability to keep a job. So I won't be able to go into all of Title VII and right to work states, but the intersection of Title VII protections and right to work states is a really interesting one, and I would encourage you to check this out. So so despite it being illegal to fire an employee based on sex under Title VII, many states operate as right to work states and therefore aren't obligated to give employees a reason for their termination. And then I'll note also that trans individuals express the greatest difficulty in employment discrimination, and 53% of trans individuals expressed in one study that discrimination moderately or significantly affected their ability to be hired. Some more workplace and hiring discrimination. I'll talk about the important intersection of race and queer and trans identities in the hiring process. So 51% of Black LGBTQ plus individuals report that discrimination moderately or significantly affected their ability to be hired, and that's compared with 33% of white LGBTQ plus individuals. And then 41% reported that it had a moderate or significant impact on their ability to retain employment. That's compared with 31% of white respondents to that survey. Then many Indigenous transgender people face workplace discrimination. 36% of Indigenous transgender people have reported losing a job because they are transgender, simply the fact that they're transgender. And then I'll encourage you to check out this great organization called Pride at Work. They're really paving a path for LGBTQ plus workers. The unfortunate thing is they mostly work with unions. So if you're in a state where unions aren't really a big thing, it might not apply, but they still have some really helpful insights for people regardless of whether they're unionized or not. So that's some workplace and hiring discrimination. Then we'll move on to housing discrimination. So we'll talk a bit about home ownership. So 49% of LGBTQ plus adults are homeowners, and that's compared with nearly 65% of cisgender heterosexual couples. So compare that 49% queer and trans are homeowners, and then 65% cisgender heterosexual homeowners. Then there's a lot of mortgage discrimination that this community faces, and cisgender queer couples are charged 0.02% to 0.2% more in interest rates, upfront fees, or both on their loans. So this might not seem like a lot, but it can add up to hundreds or even thousands of dollars over a 30-year mortgage. And then a little bit more about renting versus owning. Nearly half of LGBTQIA plus renters, 46%, are worried about discrimination in their future efforts to buy a home. So, so with renting, you're not really building that equity that you need. and they're worried about discrimination when they do, try to buy a home. Then one study showed that 17.6% of disabled LGBTQ plus people and 12.5% of LGBTQ plus people of color need and receive public housing. And this is compared to only 2.5% of non-LGBTQ plus people. So despite the fact that there are both federal and state laws prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, many trans people in search of properties to rent or buy still face unbelievable discrimination. And a lot of the time, I would say most of the time, they don't even realize that this discrimination is happening because they don't have the lived experience of being treated the way cisgender straight individuals are treated. I hope that makes sense. This gives us the phrase discrimination with a smile. So, so someone might be showing you a home, either to buy or rent. They're very kind and friendly and warm towards you, yet they're still practicing discrimination. So yeah, that's where we get discrimination with a smile. I'll talk about one of what I think is one of the most upsetting statistics I've learned about around houselessness. And I'll make a note that I use the term houselessness because not only is it more inclusive, it's more humanizing. And I found a really helpful quote to understand this. Not everyone has housing, but every person has a home. So, someone might not be living in their home, but they still do have a home somewhere. So looking at LGBTQ plus youth, here's on the left, we have a pie chart breaking down youth by identity. So around 7% of youth are LGBTQ plus. And then when we look at youth houselessness, 40% of houseless youth are LGBTQ plus. So the queer and trans community, they make up around 7% of youth overall. And then they make up 40% of houseless youth. And then I'll also add that nearly 1/3 of transgender and non-binary people have experienced houselessness in their lifetime, and rates of houselessness are even higher among disabled trans and non-binary people, and also trans and non-binary people of color. So I found this just particularly upsetting and startling. Then we'll move into some more housing discrimination. So, sorry, I'll also add that, so young people, young LGBTQ plus people are 120% more likely to experience houselessness than cisgender heterosexual youth. I'll just add that quickly. So we'll talk for a moment about HUD. So that is the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and their Fair Housing Act and Equal Access Rule. I would encourage you to go to look these up. This is another one to take note of, to look at these laws. So these laws and policies, they end up manifesting as, when discrimination occurs and someone actually realizes that it's occurring, the LGBTQ plus individuals, the onus is on them to file complaints in order for these laws to even be enforced. So these laws aren't practiced really until someone brings it up as an issue, which is really upsetting. And only 23 states have state and local level laws protecting individuals and households on the basis of sexual orientation. And of those, only 21 have laws protecting individuals and households on the basis of gender identity. And then I'll mention briefly about this organization, the National Association of Gay and Lesbian Real Estate Professionals. I can't confirm that it's pronounced NAGLREP, but that's how I'm pronouncing it. They do a lot of work, creating awareness around housing discrimination, mortgage discrimination among this community. So, if you're an audience member who belongs to the community and you're looking to buy or rent a house, this is, buy a house, this would be a really great resource for you. So we're about to move into our medical discrimination portion of the webinar. So we'll start off with a poll here. So this poll is, what percentage of transgender people do not have health insurance? It's just in the US only. All right, we've got a lot of votes in, and it looks like people are catching on to my strategy with writing these polls and the answer format. Okay, I'll go ahead and close this one out. So the answer is that 19% of transgender people in the US do not have health insurance. Okay, then we'll move on. So the cost of discrimination in medical care, and this is, I'll be talking quite a bit about this, and hopefully have some time to share some personal anecdotes. So the first thing we'll mention is the lack of knowledgeable providers. So around 3 in 10 LGBTQ+ Americans face difficulties in the last year accessing necessary medical care due to cost issues. So as you can see, so many of these issues are interrelated and they intersect at multiple points. So you know, thinking back to the slides on the general disparities and then workplace and hiring discrimination, all of this affects every other category we're talking about. So these are compounding issues. And then this, you know, facing difficulties accessing medical care due to cost, this includes more than half of transgender Americans. And I include myself in that. There have been many times where I wasn't able to go to the doctor or get medical care that I needed because of cost. So let me see, sorry, I need to get organized for a second. So many LGBTQ+ people have difficulty in finding providers who are knowledgeable about their needs, and they encounter discrimination from both insurers and providers, or they delay or forego care because of concerns about how they're going to be treated. So in the absence of any real federal legislation prohibiting healthcare discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity, LGBTQ+ people are often mostly left with very little recourse when discrimination occurs. And obviously, this leads to compounding financial burden, which then leads to poorer mental health outcomes. And that's greater financial struggles both for individuals, the community, and for society. And also think about not being able to find the right provider means more trips to different providers, more co-pays, more time off work, more money spent on childcare. All of those things have a price. So, so yeah, the federal protections around healthcare discrimination are almost completely dependent on who is in office. I don't have time to go into the history of legislation around this by President Obama, then President Trump, and now honestly a lack of movement from President Biden. Hopefully that's going to change though. But 68.5% of LGBTQIA+ people who have experienced discrimination in the past year said it negatively affected their psychological well-being, and 43.7% said that it negatively affected their physical well-being. And again, this leads to higher overall physical and mental health care costs. And then, let's see, so health insurance, like we mentioned before, only 19% of trans individuals in the US have health insurance. And many trans individuals, including myself, resort to crowdfunding to cover the cost of gender-affirming healthcare. So that's what I had to do to be able to get top surgery. And I thought I included a link in here. Maybe it's on the next slide. Yeah, okay, so we'll move into some gender-affirming healthcare costs. And if you want to learn more about the specific surgeries, I've bolded and italicized this link here. You might want to take a photo of that or jot it down. This goes over, it is a Canadian website, so the prices might be different, but it goes over what these gender-affirming surgeries are. These were previously referred to as either simply sex change or sex reassignment surgery. Those terms are outdated and not only offensive and problematic, but they're actively harmful for queer and trans people. So so we'll stick to gender-affirming healthcare and gender-affirming surgeries. Then we also have gender-affirming hormone therapy, also known as hormone replacement therapy. So many transgender people, not everyone, but many who medically transition may seek access to puberty blockers, gender-affirming hormone therapy or GAT, or gender-affirming surgeries as part of their transition. But the different forms of these puberty blockers and hormones, with health insurance, it costs around $1,000 to $1,500 annually. And then without insurance, it's about double that price. Then we'll talk about surgeries briefly. The cost of surgeries for trans men and AFAB non-binary people can cost between $7,000 and $150,000 depending on the surgery. And then the cost of surgeries for trans women and assigned male at birth non-binary people can range from $7,000 to $30,000. And I'm not an expert in the surgeries for trans women and AMAB non-binary people, but none of this includes the indirect costs associated with the procedures. And here's a question that's posed at the top of this. Are gender-affirming healthcare interventions elective? No, they are not elective. Although some trans people don't have the need to have these gender-affirming healthcare interventions. Some trans people do need them, but no, it's not. They're not elective. They are necessary and even life-saving in many circumstances. And then while some of these services may be covered by certain healthcare insurance policies, the majority of gender-affirming healthcare is not covered by insurance or is only partially covered. So disparities exist across the different policies. So queer and trans people, I mean, sometimes we just have to hope that our employers' healthcare coverage will have inclusive policies. And I've had health insurance that was inclusive and others that weren't. So even when treatments are covered, most insurance companies require letters from mental health care providers and general practitioners. So that costs even more money. Finding a therapist, then, a lot of the time you have to be in therapy for 6 months to get any of these interventions. So then finally, while this is not at all limited to just the LGBTQ+ community, there is a cost to HIV and AIDS treatment. So within the LGBTQ+ community, cisgender gay and bisexual men and transgender women may be more in need of HIV-related health care. So this includes treatment for those who are already living with HIV, and then also access to preventative care such as pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, much easier to say. And that is a daily pill that significantly lowers the risk of HIV infection. And then for people who have HIV, they often have antiretroviral therapy, or ART, and also regular doctor's visits. Those are the most common treatments for HIV. And one study estimated that the cost of this care could run anywhere between $1,800 and $4,500 each month. That's every single month. And this doesn't even account for the costs associated with hepatitis C, which about 1/3 of people with HIV also have. This doesn't include the cost of lab work, co-pays, etc. Some folks may qualify for federal and state resources like Medicare or Medicaid. These are really important sources of healthcare for people living with HIV. And about a quarter of people with HIV get their health insurance coverage through Medicare or Medicaid. And then the cost of PrEP, that can be up to $2,000 a month without insurance. And I wasn't able to find any consistent prices for the cost of PrEP with insurance. Okay, that was a lot, y'all. And thanks for hanging with me. So what I'm hoping we're going to be able to cover next time, looking forward to the future. Hopefully there will be a part 2. We're planning on there being a part 2 to this presentation. What we'll talk about next time is retirement and estate planning, family planning, mental health care costs, primary and higher education discrimination, discriminatory laws and policies around sex work, the short-term and long-term effects of capitalism for LGBTQ+ folks. That's a big conversation. The intersections of being disabled and LGBTQ+, discrimination in the military and how this affects financial outcomes, all of this, how it affects financial outcomes, the costs of legal name change, gender marker change, the cost of not allowing transgender folks to compete in athletic events or even play sports, then the costs of medical, educational, and social gatekeeping. So Gatekeeping, that's another word I would encourage y'all to really tune into and maybe jot that one down. It's really interesting, and it's something that happens in pretty much any marginalized community. So we have that, and then some action steps for allies, not just for social workers, for allies. So the first one is education. So you want to really educate yourself on the correct and inclusive terminology. For example, correct is transgender, incorrect is transgendered. So there's no ED on the end of that. It's just transgender. And then educating yourself on topics related to this community, specifically from LGBTQ+ individuals and organizations. And then you want to pass your knowledge on to others. For advocacy, you can write to elected officials, school administrators, insurance companies, really anyone who has the power to affect change. Write to them and advocate for this community. Then this is a very simple one. It's very easy, doesn't cost any money. Normalize sharing your pronouns. You can add your pronouns to your email signature. When you introduce yourself, include your pronouns like I did at the beginning of this presentation. Support clients in finding mortgage lenders who have strict non-discrimination policies and programs that offer mortgage assistance. And NAGLREP is a really great resource for doing this. Then attend racial equity trainings led by BIPOC educators and apply this knowledge to your work and to every area of your life. Then supporting LGBTQ+ clients, if you're in clinical social work or related fields, you can listen, learn, and support, and don't expect your client to do all of the educating either. When you're working with queer and trans youth, especially those with families who might not be so supportive, work with the client's family to build understanding and build support. Then educate social workers and other like allied disciplines in foster care about the importance of supporting LGBTQ+ youth who are in foster care. Then helping clients identify and sign up for federal and state financial assistance programs like WIC, Medicaid, Medicare, if applicable, and many, many more. Then supporting mutual aid organizations and groups that provide financial assistance, meals, and healthcare supplies for LGBTQ+ folks. I know here in Durham, in the Triangle, we have a really great mutual aid group called Food Not Bombs, which is a national and international form of mutual aid. It's really great, and I would encourage you to check it out. Then you want to take political action and lobby for LGBTQ+ rights. Research tips on how to be a better ally and how to avoid performative allyship as well. Then finally, and I mean this isn't finally, there are more, but support clients in identifying medication assistance programs. So those are just a few steps you can take, and we'll talk about more steps the next time around. And I wanted to end on a bit of a positive note. So there is a brighter horizon out there for the LGBTQ+ community. So thanks to recent Supreme Court decisions, there are now more federal protections for this community. President Biden signed an executive order in January laying out the protections and finally enforcing both Title IX and Title VII protections, and declaring that LGBTQ+ folks are covered under existing protections around sex-based discrimination. And then I know we're running really short on time at this point, but I do want to read this quote by the ACLU because it's just so powerful. Every employer, every landlord, every healthcare provider that is considering firing or evicting or denying healthcare to a transgender person must now think about the fact that all three branches of the federal government have made clear that anti-LGBTQ discrimination is illegal. And then I'm going to pass it over to Rita in just a moment. Oh, sorry, here are the additional resources. So so you can take a glance at this, maybe take a picture of it. These are all some really wonderful organizations and collectives who are you know, leveraging strengths in the community and also fighting for equality and equity. And I would really encourage you to check some of these out. Okay, so so we'll move on. It's 3:01. So we'll move into the questions portion. Rita, what do I need to do to give the screen back to you?
You need to go up to sharing and click on change presenter and hand it off to
Okay.
me.
Okay. Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Okay, and we will take some questions. We have about 8 minutes Felix has before he has to get going. I did want to let everyone know that next month our monthly free webinar is on Thursday, April 8th. It's on socially responsible investing. That's good for the people, the planet, and you. We'd love to see you back here again. And in May, the role of financial behavioral health in clients' post-pandemic lives. There's much to learn in this arena, and we hope you'll join us for that webinar too. And we have some other exciting ones coming up. I'd like you to know that we do have a financial social work certification. It is self-study and self-paced. We have thousands of graduates across the country and around the world. They have 6 months to complete it. There's an online final exam that you have 2 weeks to complete. We also are international in many other countries. So we also do a monthly Zoom meeting for all our students and graduates where we do case studies and trainings and learn from each other and get to know each other and what we're doing. The certification includes 20 CEUs from National NASW. And as we go into Q&A and Olga lines up a few questions we can get in, I wanted to point out that the slides aren't shared. They are proprietary, but the recording will be on our website, Facebook page, and YouTube channel in the next few days. And I know that lots of people would like to have CEs, but we give you great content on these monthly free webinars, but we don't offer CEs because then we'd have to charge. So Q&A, we are ready, Olga.
Yep. We have a lot of questions. I will try to cover.
I knew it. Oh, just let me say, this was part 1. Felix had so much to include, and I know you appreciate the beautiful and informational training he just provided. And we will have him back in the fall. We don't know exactly when, but that will be part 2. And we're looking forward to it already, Felix. Okay, Olga.
Yes. First question will be to Felix. What do you think employers can do to begin to alleviate some of these disparities for their queer and trans employees?
I would say, first of all, just basic education around these topics. I would encourage employers to take a really good hard look at their existing practices around discrimination and make sure that, like, yeah, I just think people educating themselves and specifically looking for queer and trans sources of education, so directly from the community. They can also, you know, attend myriad trainings on these topics and just begin educating themselves and try to keep an open mind and be as inclusive as possible. I know for me, I have a fear of, like, you know, when if I'm applying for a job and luckily I have the privilege of, you know, people don't assume that I'm trans, and unless I tell someone that I am, I really don't have to come out to people as trans, but not everyone is in that position. So making sure you're using people's correct pronouns in their chosen name, that's really important. So those are some of the basic steps you can take to alleviate this discrimination. And I mean, the more you know, the better you're going to be able to advocate for and support this community.
Okay, thank you, Felix. Next question, I think also to you. Is discrimination more common in urban, rural, or metropolitan region of the country? What about this stated discrimination? How might we compare against other countries if known?
Those are two really great questions. So I would say that, um, and a lot of this, is anecdotal, I would say, but typically, I mean, states that, I'll be really honest, red states, it's very difficult sometimes to be queer and or trans or any part of this community. There are pockets of acceptance, and no matter where you are, you'll be able to find other queer and trans individuals, and you'll be able to find community. I think that in rural areas, there's probably less acceptance and more discrimination, but I think that the discrimination shows up in different ways depending on where you are. Like in North Carolina, where I live, most people are familiar with HB2, otherwise known as the bathroom bill, and that makes it difficult for trans people to even exist in public. Yet I live in Durham, which isn't a booming metropolis, but is, I think it's the 85th largest city in the United States. But I feel very safe living here, despite the fact that North Carolina is largely rural. So I think, yeah, I think that depends a lot on just where you are and what community and resources you're able to access. And then for the second question, how the U.S. compares to other countries. So you would think that, like, Scandinavia, with their very inclusive healthcare policies, they have socialized healthcare. Until very recently, if someone wanted to, if someone is trans and wanted to transition, they would need to be undergo medical sterilization, and that law was only reversed a few years ago. So even these countries that we think of as very progressive, they have some very backwards policies. I'll say there are some countries that it is very dangerous to be queer or trans, and that it doesn't apply to every community within that country. But I mean, I have friends who are living in the United States under political asylum from Brazil. So that's just one example. But then, think about, like, a lot of what we think of as more progressive countries. They also have some pretty discriminatory laws and policies.
Okay, thank you. Rita, can you please explain how financial social work helps a person get better with their money?
I would love to do that. And I appreciate that question, but let's see if we can get Felix to answer one or two more questions, because that's really why most people are here. Thanks, Olga.
Okay. Okay, next question to Felix. Do you have any ideas or resources for how to start some LGBTQ youth shelters?
Youth shelters. So so there's what's it called? Okay, so a lot of LGBTQ centers have host home programs, and if you want to learn more about those, the Durham LGBTQ Center here in Durham, North Carolina, has a great host home program. So so I would take a look at their website and even reach out to the director, Jay. Jay's a really wonderful member of this community, and they do a lot of work around this host home program. But I would just check with your local LGBTQ center to see if they already have something like that, and if not, suggesting that, striking up a conversation about it.
Okay, thank you. Another question: how can an LGBTQIA individual discriminated against by a home health agency take action to get the situation rectified and also to work for systematic change?
So, like I mentioned in the medical portion, it's very administration dependent, and like whoever's in office, the presidential office, and hopefully President Biden is going to be rolling out some of the same protections that President Obama rolled out. So I would stay tuned for that in the hopefully upcoming weeks. We'll see how quickly he's able to move on that. But you can file complaints. Unfortunately, sometimes that's the only recourse that folks can take, and that's really upsetting. And I know that's not a great answer, but another way, like a more interpersonal way to do this is it takes some labor, but providing some education and some perspective to folks, and then reaching out to the directors of those home health programs and letting them know that this is taking place. And self-advocacy is a survival skill that many LGBTQ plus people have had to develop. So yeah, I would recommend also seeing if there's a social worker who works with that home health agency. Oftentimes there are, and I would check with them about what recourse could be taken.
Okay. Next question. Can you speak more about what Title VII is and what right to work state are?
Yes. So okay, Title VII. Sorry, let me flip back. I have the exact language here. So bear with me. So Title VII, this states that Title VII makes it unlawful for an employer to fail or refuse to hire or discharge any individual or otherwise to discriminate against any individual because of such individual's race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And so the definition of sex within this, this definition of the law includes both sexual orientation and gender identity. So there are federal protections in place that make sure that there's not discrimination in the hiring process. Right to work, that means that an employer can terminate you and they don't have to give reason for why you're being terminated. So that's why that creates such an interesting intersection between those two policies. So we have these like federal level laws, you know, prohibiting discrimination, yet when it comes to termination of employment, there aren't really any protections around that. So I would, you know, there are a lot of really great articles and resources kind of picking apart those issues with Title VII. So I'd recommend taking a look at some of those.
Okay.
Okay, I know that Felix has another training he has to do in a very short period of time. Let's sneak in one last question and we'll let you go, Felix, until next time.
Okay. Are people part of the community if they are allies and support the community?
Sorry, could you read that one more time?
Are people part of the community if they are allies and support the community?
Okay, so our allies part of the community.
Mm-hmm.
So the short answer, and I anticipate it might be a difficult one to hear. So allies are incredibly important to the community, and I know that without the support of allies, I wouldn't have been able to get top surgery. I wouldn't have been able to find the really amazing job that I have right now. And there's also the fact that these LGBTQ plus spaces are very they're really sacred, and unless you are a member of the community, meaning like if you are LGBTQIA, you know, et cetera, you probably don't have the lived experiences. You may have similar experiences, but you know, just like as a white person, I'm not a member of the BIPOC community. I try to be the best ally that I can be. I'm always trying to learn more, and part of being an ally is understanding that that there's a lot of that it's critical for queer and trans and asexual intersex people to have spaces that are just for them. And I hope that makes sense, and I hope that doesn't turn anyone off to the idea of being an ally. Allies are incredibly important.
Well, I think that was a great answer. I thank you so much, Felix, for the really incredibly informative training and beautiful training. And we will look forward to seeing you in just a few months to do part 2.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. This has been such a tremendous honor, and I really appreciate your time and allowing me the space to present on this.
All right, everybody. I hope to see you back here next month and the next time that Felix presents for us. Have a great day. Stay well. Keep wearing your masks and get your vaccines. Thanks. Bye now.